Welcome everyone to my online course for research methods in psychology. My name is Frank Losciavo and I am your instructor. I have several interesting things to share with you today, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to use Microsoft Word to create a professional APA-style research report template. And it'll have all the necessary sections: a title page, an abstract, introduction, method, results, and discussion sections. And don't worry, I'll also demonstrate how to set up a running head in the header section and a table that's perfect for reporting statistical information. The interesting thing about the APA-style research report that you're looking at right here is that it focuses on tips for formatting and writing APA-style research reports. So we'll consult this report frequently throughout this video. For example, you can see it has a running head, it has an author's note, an abstract, an introduction section, a method section, a results section, a discussion section, references, footnotes, although you'll probably avoid footnotes. I always try to avoid footnotes. And a really slick table. So let's replicate this report from scratch. And when you're finished, you'll have a template that you can use for any professional APA-style research report. All right, let's get started. What I did was simply open up a blank document. Let's go ahead and just do some very basic formatting. So for example, let's click on the Home tab and then make sure we're using an appropriate sized font. By default, I tend to use Calibri 11 point. I used to use Times New Roman 12 point. As long as you're using a relatively small font, you're usually going to be in good shape. Let's go ahead and set up the spacing. In general, everything in an APA-style research report is double spaced. So go ahead and click on the paragraph option. From there, if you want to see all the available options, click on the launcher in the lower right corner. I'm going to set the line spacing to double space. And I don't want any extra spacing before or after the paragraphs, so I'm going to change this to 0 after. Now that we have the line spacing set to double space, and we have no space before or after paragraphs, we can go ahead and click OK. APA-style research reports typically have margins of at least 1 inch all the way around. So let's go ahead and click on Layout and then set up our margins. And although that normal setting looks good because there are 1 inch margins all the way around, we're actually going to select Custom Margins. I know I just said we want 1 inch margins all the way around, but we're going to change that top margin to 1.5 inches. And that's because we need to leave room for our header. Speaking of headers, let's take a closer look at what we need to do. When we look at this research report, we see that there's a running head in the header. And the thing that's interesting here is that the header on page 1 is actually different than the header on the rest of the paper. So let me scroll down to page 2 and show you what I mean. Here's the header for page 2. You can see it no longer has those words running head. That's kind of a strange little detail, but remember, strange little details are important for APA style. So let me show you how we can format our report that way. If our header is going to be different for page 1 compared to how it is for page 2 and the remaining pages, then I just need to add some extra pages so I have something to work with. So all I'm going to do is hit my Enter key several times. And you can see I'm just going down until I hit page 2. So now my research report actually has 2 pages that I can work with. All right, I'm going to just scroll right back up to the top. Let's go ahead and add that header. We do that from the Insert menu. So go ahead and click on Insert, and then click on Header, and then at the bottom click on Edit Header. All right, let's take care of a few important things first. Remember, I mentioned we're going to have a different header for the first page. And right here you see there's an option for Different First Page. And you might have noticed right when I clicked on that, this changed and now it says First Page Header. And here's something else we want to take care of before we forget. Remember, we want 1-inch margins all the way around. So I want that header to start about 1 inch from the top. So come up over here and increase that to 1 inch. Okay, now let's enter the text for the first page header. Of course, you'll enter text that coincides with your own paper. The running head usually has the first few words from the title of your paper. Within the header, we also want to include a page number. So I'm going to hit my Tab key until I'm all the way to the right side of the paper. And I just hit it once, that put me to about the middle, and now one more time, I'm all the way at the right. At this point, we want to insert a page number right where we're at, right in our current location. So up over here where it says page number, I'm going to select the option for current location, and I'm going to select just the plain number option. And there you go, my friends. You have your header set up for page 1. But remember, now we need to set it up a little bit differently for page 2 and the remaining pages. So while we're still in this header and footer tab, go ahead and click on Next. This will take us to the next header. This will be our header for page 2 and all the pages that follow. As before, I entered in a short title, but I did not include the words running head. I'm now going to tab once toward the middle, another toward the right, and then enter a page number. It's that easy. Now we have our header set up. And just make sure you understand how to play with it. If I click on Previous, I go to that first page header. I click Next, I go to that second page header. So if I ever did need to edit that header, that's how I would do it. Now that we have the header all set up, we can close the header and the footer section. Here's a quick tip. If you want to see how your formatting is looking as you're working on your paper, click on Print Preview and see how it looks. Based on the print preview, you can see that the 2 headers are set up correctly. On page 1, the words running head are included, but on page 2, those words are not included. That's exactly what we want. All right, let's take a look at our sample report. We can see that right there on page 1, we need a title for the paper, we need the author, and then the author's affiliation. The title of the paper is usually located in the upper third of that first page, so I'm just going to give myself a few extra spaces and then put in my title. On the next double-spaced line, I'm going to list myself as the author, and then under that, I'll put my affiliation. As we look at this template, we can see that the title is bolded, so let's go ahead and make sure we do that. All right, let's continue to consult our template. Let's scroll down a little bit. We can see now we need to list an author note. The author note is always at the bottom of that first page, So just give yourself a little bit of room and then start typing. Starting from the left, I'm going to indent and then again put my name and my affiliation. On the next double-spaced line, I'm going to indent and then put my contact information. That's it for page 1. All right, here I am back at our template. On page 2, we put our abstract. And here's a lot of great information about writing your abstract. I'm not going to read every word to you in this video, but feel free to pause the video if you want to get more information. Here are a couple things to note. One is that the word abstract is what we call a level 1 heading. Level 1 headings are centered, they're bolded, and they're in title case. You'll also notice that the actual abstract is not indented. That's just one of those strange, quirky things about APA style. And then underneath the abstract, we put a few keywords. So let's go ahead and set up our abstract. I'm just going to hit the Enter key on my keyboard a few times to get myself down into page 2. And I'm just going to scroll up a little bit so that we can better see it. As a level 1 heading, we're going to need to center this and put it in bold. And then, flush from the left, you can type in your abstract. Generally speaking, I often think it's best to write your abstract last, after you've written the rest of your report. Because within your abstract, you essentially need to summarize what the entire report says. Okay, now let's go to a new line and enter our keywords. The word keywords needs to be italicized. The keywords are important because when people are trying to find your article, they might use those keywords to search for your article. So think about them carefully and then enter a few. All right, my friends, that's page 2. Let's go ahead and hit print preview just to take a quick look. I'd say that looks pretty darn good. Here we are back at our sample report. On page 3, we actually begin the body of our report, the introduction. There's no heading labeled introduction. What we put instead is the title of our paper. So it's up to you. To get to page 3, you can either hit your Enter key on your keyboard several times, or you can insert a page break. That title needs to be centered, so center your cursor and then type it in. This needs to be bolded as well. And at this point, you'd begin writing the introduction of your research report. The primary purpose of this section is to outline the goals and the purposes of your research, and also to inform readers about past research that's relevant. As you're writing your introduction and you're discussing previous research, it's important to cite those research studies in text. You can see that in this paragraph, I discussed the research of Combs from 2018. And right there in text, parenthetically, I cite his research. Later on in the references section, we'll have a listing, an entry for every single article or book chapter that we cite. As you're working on your report, make sure you're using all of the resources that you have available to you. For example, your textbook discusses writing research reports in detail. You can see in this ebook, as I scroll down, there is a section on presenting results. In other words, the textbook has tons of information about writing an APA-style research report. And as you'll see later in that section, there are sample research reports. And those sample reports are incredibly helpful as you're trying to figure out how to structure your own report. Here we are back at our sample report. After you write the introduction section, the next section is the method section. This section often has subsections. For example, in this sample report, there are subsections for participants, survey, and procedure. Those subsections just give more detailed information about each of those topics. So on the very next double-spaced line, we'll begin our method section. As a level 1 heading, it needs to be centered, bolded, and written in title case. The subsection labeled Participants is a level 2 heading. It's flush to the left, but it is also bold and written in title case. Although the method section does not start on its own page, in these situations where the headings are above the text and the text moves to the next page, you can go ahead and give yourself a couple extra spaces to move yourself down to the next page. It's very common to have a subsection for participants because that just gives you an opportunity to identify exactly who participated in the research. As we discuss the research methods that we've used in this method section, I'm also going to include a subsection labeled Survey. Of course, this subsection isn't needed for every APA-style research report, but if you've conducted a survey, it makes a lot of sense that in this section, you'll put some detail about that survey instrument. Also, within this method section, we're going to include a subsection for the procedures that we use. This is a really important section. You need to describe exactly how your research was conducted from beginning to end. You need to be very clear. After the procedure section, we're going to start our results section. The results section is one of those major sections of the paper, so it begins with a level 1 heading. In the results section, you'll present the statistical analyses of your data. This section should include a description of the analyses only, and you should try to make it as easy to understand as possible. Overall, I think the results of our survey will be relatively straightforward to present. However, we collected data on many different questions from that survey. So we'll probably want to put most of the results summarized in a table. Tables come just a little bit later in an APA-style manuscript. I'll show you that section soon. After the results section, we have a discussion section. Because it's one of the major components of an APA-style research report, it will have a level 1 heading. So let's go to the very next double-spaced line and begin the discussion section right there. The discussion section is important for putting your research into perspective. So in this section, you'll briefly review your findings and provide an interpretation. What do your results mean? You'll also try to integrate your current findings with past research. Where do your results fit in? And finally, you'll want to note if there were any problems or limitations to your research study, and then discuss some suggestions for future research options. Here we are back in our sample report. We can see that after the discussion section, on the next page, on a new page, is the references section. Let's work on that next. As I mentioned, we want to make sure the references section begins on a new page. I'm toward the end of the page, so let's hit enter on our keyboard and see what happens. Now we're on a new page, so that's good. Let's begin our reference section right here. As one of the major sections of an APA-style research report, the references section has a level 1 heading, so we know it's going to be centered, bolded, and in title case. Earlier in the paper, I cited the research of Combs and his colleagues from 2018. Let me show you how to format that in this section. First, let's take a look at our sample report. You can see that each of the references has what we call a hanging indent. Let me show you how to set that up. First, because the details are important, I'm going to make sure that the journal name and the volume number are italicized, as they should be. Now, let me show you how to do that hanging indent. First, go to the Home tab. Then, click on the Paragraph option. Then, click on the Launcher so you have access to all of the options. Now, in this section for indentation, click on Special, Hanging, and have it hanging by about 0.25. That's what I use, 1/4 of an inch. And then click on OK. Because we just changed the formatting of the paragraphs, when I hit Enter and I go to the next line, that next line is going to be formatted just like the line above. So it's ready for the next reference. It has a hanging indent already built in. That said, when we're done with the references, we'll want to turn that off. So I'm going to go back to the Paragraph option. I'm going to click on the Launcher. And then I'm going to turn off the hanging indent. I'm going to say OK, and now it's off. Here we are back at our sample paper. After the references section, you can see that I have a section labeled footnotes. In general, I try to avoid footnotes, and you probably should too. When possible, just include that information within text. However, if you want to include footnotes, the easiest way to do it is to have a section at the end like this. I mentioned that we collected data from so many different questions, we might want to include some of that data in a table. Tables come after this section, so let me show you how to build a table. Let's scroll down and take a look at the table that I have in this sample paper. First off, you'll notice it's beautiful. It's very easy to read. It's very simple. It's very organized. You want your tables to be structured in the same way. The whole point is that you're going to take some very detailed information and you're going to present it in a table in a very organized, easy to consume way. Here's something else that you might have noticed. When I scroll up, I can see that this page right here is formatted in a typical portrait orientation. However, when I come down here to this table, it's using a landscape orientation, and that gives me more room. Let me show you how to do that. Tables and figures always begin on a new page. So you can hit the Enter key and scroll yourself down to a new page, or you can insert a page break. However, in this particular case, because I want to have a landscape layout on the next page, I'm going to do things just a little bit differently. So at the very top, I'm going to go to the Layout tab. And then I'm going to click on breaks and see what options I'm given. And in this case, I don't want a page break, I want a section break. And I want the new section to begin on the next page. By including a new section, I can format that section just a little bit differently. So I'm going to click on Section Break, Next Page. So far, nothing looks different. But if I come over here and I click on Orientation, and then I select Landscape, now I can see that this page is in Landscape Orientation, whereas the previous pages are in Portrait Orientation. That's good stuff, my friends. Let's go ahead and set up our table. Here I am back at the sample report. I just want to get a good look at this table. This table will allow us to list each question from our survey. And then I included 3 other columns. One column is labeled Top 2 Box Percentage. What that's going to represent is the proportion of people who mentioned having severe or extreme stress for any one of the questions we asked. The next column is for the mean, so on that 5-point scale, we can compute some simple means, and anytime you report a mean, you typically report a standard deviation right along with it. All right, let me give you some tips for how to set that up. Tables are framed by straight lines, and I find that the easiest way to put a straight line is to use my tab key. So I tab all the way out until I reach the right side of the screen. At that point, I highlight that section and I underline it. So I'm just using the same basic underline function that you would find from the home menu, right there, underline. Now, while I have the underline option still selected, I can go ahead and type in my column headings. At this point, now that I'm ready to type in the questions and the statistics, I can turn off the underline option. As I mentioned, tables are framed by straight lines, so I'm going to put a straight line at the bottom of this table as well. Here I am back at the sample report. Typically, underneath each table, you'll find a note. That section is there so that you can clarify anything that's not clear within the table. Let's go ahead and check out the print preview just to see how this report looks. As you can see, it looks really good. The title page is formatted correctly. The abstract looks nice and neat and clean. As we move along, we can see the introduction, moving into the methods section, then moving into the results section and the discussion section. We can see references, footnotes, and our table. In other words, everything is there. So this file that you've just created can serve as a great template for any APA-style professional research report that you need to write. I hope you found this video helpful. I'll see you in the next video.